Thank you so much for joining us for Doubleheader. Doubleheader is a show with the Red Angeles circuit of channels. I am Philip Young of CA Propcast, and I am joined today by Francesca D'Aquila. Right?
Yes.
Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Correct.
And just to give myself a little introduction for the uninitiated out there in the audience, I'm a proprietarian anti-statist and right-wing libertarian activist. I prioritize the individual natural right to private property because it comes from our divine creator and should never be violated by the state or by anyone else. It cannot be arbitrarily revoked. So very much I'm very much in the camp of the American right wing, and my understanding is that Francesca is as well. And so as such, we're both activists in our own capacities, and we do everything we can to make positive right wing contributions to the cultural discourse and to widen the Overton window in this country in the right direction. And so to analyze how we can best go about that, and what effective forms of activism we can adopt, particularly as they pertain to the millennial and Generation Z generations, I'd like to talk to Francesca today about her work with the illustrious, acclaimed organization Turning Point USA. Now, with that, Francesca, if you could introduce yourself a little bit and just tell us a little bit about your position with Turning Point, what that generally entails, and then we can kind of segue from there into what effective forms of grassroots activism members of the audience can potentially take.
Yes. So my name is Francesca. Obviously, I work with Turning Point. I'm considered a field representative, so I oversee an area within LA County, Riverside County, San Bernardino County, different colleges, different community colleges like within the area. I'll do grassroots activism through tabling, through campus events, community events. So any community event, any on-campus event, you're going to see me there doing the grassroots activism, talking to students every day, letting them know things that are happening like within the area, if they're ever interested in working on campaigns or working with other community members, anything like that. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell.
Excellent. And does that often entail distributing literature and pamphlets, brochures? Yeah,
so we'll set up a table. It'll have... we always bring a little mini pocket constitution, which is nice. We have like buttons, we have stickers, we have all the cool merch for Turning Point. We will have like big foam boards that say very controversial things on them. So that's kind of how we like to stir the pot. Let's see. What is one, for example? My favorite is 9mm beats 911 every time. That gets a lot of students upset.
Yeah, I bet it does.
So that's my favorite one to bring, but we have a lot of stuff like that.
Very well said. And I've also, of course, having interacted with members of Turning Point and representatives from Turning Point for a long time now, and I've been to America Fest 3 years in a row. It's always a really fun event, including I was there this past December. I've also seen the Socialism Sucks.
Yes.
And I think, is it Big Government Sucks?
Big Gov Sucks.
Big Gov Sucks, okay. And there's also the I Heart Capitalism.
I Heart Capitalism. There's like Dump Your Socialist Boyfriend, Dump Your Socialist Girl. That was a big hit this past like Valentine's Day.
Okay,
with the socialist clubs, yeah.
Yes, well, that's fantastic right there. And so, in your experience in this capacity, what has working in this position taught you about how young people, like I guess between the ages of shall we say 18 and 35, we'll be generous there. What has your position taught you about how young people on the right and the left tend to think, and what their fundamental values are that motivate their ideology? Yeah,
so Turning Point does a really good job in just educating basic ABCs of politics. As you know, like Turning Point USA, the USA side is nonpartisan, so we don't force or really talk about who to vote for or like what to vote for. We just go based off of education. So like looking at the issue at hand, kind of just educating based off of that. So I think they do a really good job in just teaching students. We make it as basic and simple as possible. So we're able, students are able to understand it like that. And with, with all the signs and everything we use, it can't be more simple and to the point than that. So with that, do students understand yet? Not really. I don't know how much more basic you can get with the stuff that we have and like what we talk about. I just find it that students are just really apathetic these days. They don't, care too much, even to like come up and talk to us. So that part, kind of sucks, but we're going to get through it and it's going to be okay. But,
we certainly will. And, I guess the logical follow up to that question would be, of the ones who do engage with you and who do, care enough or, have the courage or whatever to come up and talk to you and engage with you directly. Do you generally get more of a hostile than a positive response or is it vice versa?
Living in California, which everybody says they hate California, blah, blah, blah. Living in California, and I go to schools, like I said, LA County, San Bernardino, Riverside County. I get a good mix. I would say more positive than negative.
Good.
I've had a few occasional like hostile run-ins, nothing too crazy. But I would say more positive. Students that come up to the table will say things like, I can't believe you're out here. That is so crazy. You're so brave. Like, I am so happy to see you here. Like, I want to be a part of this. Like, I want to do this. I want to do that.
Excellent.
Hostile things would, and it's kind of funny because people that are hostile, they say things like from afar. So they'll be walking by and from afar they'll yell, "Oh, you're stupid. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," or whatever. Just the most, dumb things that they could say. They'll never come up and actually, tell you to your face. It'll just be from afar, which I find very interesting.
I have to ask, so do they shout racist, fascist?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I've
the
run
basic,
all that
the basic sayings.
Nazi, this, that, and the other, so yeah.
We're okay with it now.
The usual stuff. I wish I had a nickel for every time.
I know.
I've been called those things. I'm sure it's the same way on your end. But so now, so when you're on these campuses, and you're recruiting and you're passing out literature, of the ones who come up and have positive engagements with you and compliment you on your presence there and the work you're doing, are they generally very enthusiastic about being activists in the long term, or is it more kind of just a temporary enthusiasm just from seeing you there?
Yes and no. It is somewhat temporary, which again kind of sucks because you want them to be a little bit more long term. You want them to have long term excitement.
Of course.
Especially this year is an election year, so you want the long term. But I would say most are kind of temporary. They're just like, "Wow, you're here. I can't believe that. You're so brave." And then that's kind of it. But there's a few, and I have a good handful, maybe more than a good handful of students that are long-term that want to stay with Turning Point. They want to be involved. They want to make a difference. They want to run for local, politics. They want to do things in the community. So there are like a good handful. Honestly, that's all you need is a good handful to kind of start.
A small vanguard.
Yeah.
It was only 3% of the American colonists who were physically in the field at any given time taking up arms against the British during the American Revolution. So that's an important principle to remember. It's a very motivated, very small minority that affects these seismic social and cultural changes.
Yeah.
Now, and speaking of seismic social and cultural changes and movements, I wanted to ask about something that's slightly more sensitive, but I think it's really crucial. If we're going to be, on here having this discussion, we would be remiss to avoid it. Ever since this latest war broke out, this latest round of armed conflict broke out between Israel and, the Palestinian era, specifically the ones that inhabit Gaza right now, and specifically Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, what have you, what sort of differences have you noticed and how that's affected how you do your job on these campuses? Can you talk a little bit about how that may or may not have affected your role?
So it was tough. And the riots, protests, whatever you want to call them, they started maybe a little bit before like the war was in full force, I would say. And then the riots and protests, they just kind of got worse and worse as it went on. I'm sure you saw at UCLA and bigger schools how bad it got. I didn't really notice or have schools that got that far. We had schools that just had like the simple protest where they would stand with their flag and whatever. Nothing got really hostile or aggressive. But I'm also not a Jewish student, so I don't really know. But just from what I saw and what I saw on the campuses, nothing was too bad. Again, I don't work in like UCLA, USC, those kind of schools.
Or Berkeley.
Right, or Berkeley. So I didn't have any of that, but we did have the protests and the riots. Nothing bad though, where they had encampments or anything like that.
Well, and you didn't see any like serious widespread violence?
No, I didn't. Yeah.
That's good. Is it your sense, just from the ones you did see, because I think it's pretty obvious from the real bad ones at UCLA and at Berkeley and the Ivy League schools, but when you were at, say, UC Riverside, for example, which I think is within your jurisdiction.
Yes.
When you saw the pro-Palestinian Arab protesters, did you notice like a large Antifa presence amongst them?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can say they're hand in hand.
Okay, that makes sense because their ideologies are very, very much the same. Were they dressed in black bloc or?
Yes, the black, and then of course like the scarves.
Oh,
well, that's
keffiyeh.
different, but the scarves that they would wear.
And did you
the mask? They cover their face and all that.
Yeah,
which is very interesting.
Plated scarf and everything. And so, did you also notice a lot of I guess cultural Marxist rhetoric amongst them? Like, did they kind of mix it in with gender insanity or pro transgender rhetoric or pro LGBTQ?
Not really.
It wasn't too
Not
mixed.
from what I witnessed. Yeah.
Okay. Because I have seen some of that, not in person, but through video footage, and I'm sure you'll agree with me on this one. I find it rather strange that people that are aligning themselves with an Islamic terrorist organization like Hamas are out of the other side of their mouth are loudly proclaiming their support for LGBTQ people.
Yeah,
and yet they're
it's very funny.
Yes, they're allying themselves with an Islamist movement that routinely will slit the throats of gay people and throw them off rooftops just for fun.
Yeah, so Vegas is in my area as well, so I'll travel to UNLV, which is the school up there a lot. I was like approached by someone from like the pro-Palestine rally that came up to me and started talking to me and asking me questions about like, what do I believe? Like, what side am I on? Blah, blah, blah. Basically, long story short is that I found out that he wasn't even a student of the school. He was not even a community member. He literally told me he was paid to be there, which I thought was hilarious. So what you're saying is these things kind of go hand in hand, and bringing the LGBTQ and all of that, it's all the same. It's all one movement. And it's really sad that students don't realize that. Not even students, but like the general population of people, they don't realize, they don't really see that, that it's all together.
So in other words, what you're saying is you've noticed, even just in some of the travels you've done at some of these universities that don't tend to make headlines very much, even there, at places like UNLV, you've noticed the presence of what some might call outside agitators.
Right.
And specifically paid ones.
Right.
I'm curious, did he say or give any indication as to who or what paid him?
No.
Okay.
After I really honed in on that, and then he was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But he did. He shared it with me.
He got smart again. And we can reasonably speculate as to who that might have been. It was likely one of George Soros's front groups.
Yeah, it could have been, yeah.
And the what leads me to believe that is that even though George Soros is of Jewish ancestry, he was a Nazi collaborator as a teenager.
Yeah.
And he much of his activism appears to, ironically have a pretty anti-Semitic streak to it. And obviously he's also a very left-wing cultural Marxist. So it makes sense that he would be, his front organizations might be willing to pay, pro-Palestinian Arab demonstrators to show up, or pro-Hamas demonstrators to show up, because Soros loathes national borders more than anything else, and if Israel is attempting to enforce its national borders, then he might want to pay people to agitate against that.
Yes. Yeah.
So that makes perfect sense. Of course, disclaimer: I don't know any of this for a fact. I'm speculating. No. I'm making an educated guess.
Yeah.
Right here. So don't take that for gospel. I guess getting away from the Israel-Palestine issue a little bit here. Have you personally witnessed any of the weird, insane behavior we've come to associate? The pro-transgender or pro-gender insanity
Yes, a
activists
lot.
with? Have you encountered that? Like, what's some of the stuff
Yeah.
they've said to you? I've encountered some of this as well, but I
Yes,
just wanted to
so
happen to you.
we actually, at the same school at UNLV in Vegas, we hosted Charlie Kirk. He did like a Prove Me Wrong table, which I'm sure you've seen like the videos of. And there was a group of like, you could clearly see they were transgender. Very interesting outfit choices, I will say.
Yes.
And they were, Charlie Kirk's a fascist, blah, 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 whatever. But yeah, we're approached by them a lot. They always start off very, I will say, like innocent. They ask questions, which I appreciate. Like I love to talk, and I want to get to the bottom of it. So I want to hear what you have to say.
That's what you're there for.
I always say, like, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm crazy. Like, tell me otherwise. It never happens, but
Yes.
yeah. So we're approached by them a lot. They like I said, start off like very innocent, but then it starts to get hostile when they find that we don't agree on a lot of terms. So
Yes.
Yeah.
And do they are these the sort of people that tend to get very angry when someone
they
fails
get very defensive.
when you fail to use their preferred pronouns?
Oh yeah.
Or something like that. So now when you say this crowd of transgender people show up, are you saying everyone in this crowd was actually transgender themselves, or are you saying they were pro-transgender activists?
Right.
Okay, so you're saying that not all of them were necessarily trans.
Yeah,
but
I'm not gonna assume that they were all
Okay. But and that's the thing that strikes me as the most or one of the most unreasonable things that the gender insanity crowd is promoting is you have these situations where they clearly look like a member of their biological sex. They present that way publicly, and yet they get very indignant and very angry.
Yeah.
Often, foaming themselves into a rage when someone fails to use either accidentally or on purpose their preferred pronouns. It's like when you want to be perceived and treated a certain way, you have a duty to present in that way.
Right.
I don't get to wear overtly, right-wing T-shirts like what I'm wearing right now, and then complain.
Right.
When people assume.
Right.
That I'm ideologically right-wing.
Right.
That's not how it works. So if you're a biological male and you identify as trans and you want society to recognize you as a woman, then you need to do everything in your power to present to society as a woman.
Yeah.
That's really what we're saying. You don't get to present as a man still and then get angry
Yeah.
when you're perceived as a man.
Yeah, and I have met a handful of people that claim to say they're transgender that they don't act like that. They don't care as much as if you use their preferred pronouns or whatever. They're more relaxed about it, which is
Good.
kind of nice, I guess.
Yeah, that's rather refreshing right there. And did these, I guess, pro-transgender activists, LGBTQ activists, did they get really angry when they discovered that, you guys, of course, because no reasonable, sane person should, that you guys do not support the gender transitioning of children? Did that really make them mad?
They always get mad about that. Yeah, I always bring up the books in school. I bring up
Inappropriate?
the inappropriate books in school, which they always. I don't even remember how they like defend themselves with that, but that's just like that's a whole other story. The inappropriate books in school, but
that doesn't even have anything to do in and of itself with homosexuality or transgenderism. It's like it wouldn't be appropriate to expose children to matters of heterosexual sex, in that way either. So it's like they act like we're discriminating against them. It's like, no, we're just saying that a 5 or 6 year old is not ready to be taught about graphic sexual topics. They're just not.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what kind of sex, whether it's hetero or homo or transgenderism. It's not appropriate for them.
yeah, and
That's what we're
I don't
saying.
know if it's because they're young and they just don't have kids yet, so they don't realize. I mean, I'm young, I don't have kids either, but maybe I just have more brain cells than they do.
I would bet that you
But
do.
I don't know what it is. I don't know why they think that it's okay. I could guess that they don't. I can guess it's because they don't have Jesus in their life, but
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure that the vast majority of them don't.
Yeah.
That's a fairly safe bet. And they're also, of course, they're comfortable with actual medical gender transitioning being done to children as well, which is beyond me because, it's like most people on the far left that I've asked, except for maybe the really, really honest ones, I ask them, so is it acceptable for an adult man, a full-grown man to, have a sexual relationship with, a minor who's a boy or girl, a male or female minor? They'll say, well, no, of course not. And I'll go, okay, so if it's not acceptable or appropriate for minors to consent to sex because they can't competently consent to sex, then why on earth would they be able to be competent to consent to medical gender transitioning that is often irreversible,
right,
and that will mutilate them permanently,
right?
It's like they can't consent to sex, but they can consent to gender transitioning treatments.
I know.
To me, that's clinically insane.
I agree.
So it's, have you ever had any of them like attempt to tell you why a child, could consent to gender transitioning, but not to, sexual intercourse?
I've never had that come up yet, and it's funny that you say that because I'm gonna ask that question.
Yeah.
Going into next semester of the tabling and see what they say.
It's a very fair question.
It's hard to sometimes talk to students because a lot of them just don't have a huge grasp of everything that's going on, and they just are like so stuck in their bubble of I am gay, this is all I am. Like they put their whole identity into like being, this is just an example, just being gay. Like they just throw their whole identity, everything else like they just don't care about.
And being their sexual orientation is the most important and interesting thing about them.
That was just an example, but they just throw everything into that. And I'm like, hello, there's so many other things. You don't have to just write one thing. The
idea that somebody's race or sexual orientation or gender identity is the most important or significant thing about them. It's so incredibly strange to me, and it seems like we had a whole generation of people, like back in the 60s and 70s, that were trying to push back on the idea that those things are the most important thing about a person. That you evaluate group demographic identity over the individual worth of that person, and it scares me that you have a whole generation of leftists that are trying to take us away from that and into this collectivist demographically based tyranny.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of their plan though. It's been a thought out plan, all along, and just to break down everything, and that's what they're doing,
Well, it seems to me, Francesca, and you're making an invaluable contribution to this. The best weapon that we have in the fight against this is truth, and also the willingness to to speak, to proclaim it loudly, to proclaim it from the rooftops, to to overcome whatever fears we might be facing that might otherwise prevent us from doing that.
Yes.
If we proclaim these obvious self-evident truths, as Thomas Jefferson put it, that we have, because we do have this truth, if we are bold enough to proclaim it, it will ultimately win. And I think that we are reaching peak woke, and the tide will turn. The tide is turning.
I agree.
It's high time for for peak woke to come and pass, and then we'll have a Thermidorian reaction, and this cultural Marxist garbage will lose, and it'll take its rightful place on the ash heap of history.
Yeah, like you said in the beginning, it just takes a small few people.
It does. A vanguard. So which Lenin would use that term, but we're going to use it in reverse. We're going to apply the same principle in reverse.
Yes.
But Francesca, thank you so much for joining us today on Doubleheader with Red Angeles. We're so privileged to have you. We look forward to having you here in the future on this show and on other Red Angeles channels, including your own, of course.
Yes.
And so thank you so much for being here to discuss these meaty topics. And God bless you in your work. Godspeed. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And as always, everyone out there, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching. And until next time, Sic Semper Tyrannis.